Okay class, so these are the annotations for Act 1, Scene 3 that are particularly relevant to how Shakespeare presents the witches and how Shakespeare also first presents the contrast between Macbeth and Banquo. Okay, but this is mainly in preparation for our essay lesson on Thursday about how Shakespeare presents the witches. So that's going to be the focus of these annotations. Alright, so we're going back over these and making your own annotations in a bit more detail about Macbeth and Banquo. So first off, so foul and fair a day I have not seen. This quote should sound familiar because it's how the witches conclude Act 1, Scene 1. Okay, so Shakespeare is writing Macbeth as mirroring, okay, and you use that word if you perhaps wanted to introduce it as a quote in your writing, the witches. Okay, he's mirroring their speech, isn't he? So we can interpret this in two ways, or maybe more if you ever think. So one way could be that the witches' powers are influencing him already, even though they haven't actually met him yet when they make this prediction, and they say this in Act 1, Scene 1. Or, okay, we could say that Macbeth using this type of language could be Shakespeare showing us that he already has the evil potential in him. Okay, so Shakespeare straight away is setting up a couple of different ways that we can view Macbeth through the use of this contrast, which you say is the device. And again, okay, we've talked about how it's important to always talk about form and structure if we're trying to push ourselves some of those higher marks. So the structure here would be this mirroring of Macbeth's language with the witches. Okay. Alrighty. So the witches pop up, they have a look, Banquo sees them and he's saying, oh my god, you know, what in the world, you look so wild, you don't look like you live of this earth, can I talk to you? And they don't say anything to him at first, and he says, you seem to understand me, but each at once, her chappy finger, so her scabby finger, laying upon her skinny lips. So as though you were shh, like when you were in primary school, that sort of gesture. Okay. So we can interpret this a couple of ways, can't we? This isn't an obvious quote to look at, but I think it's quite interesting. So what could the symbolism of this be? And I think that's actually a nice rhetorical question to use in your writing. Okay. So what could the symbolism of this gesture be? It could be different for Macbeth than for Banquo. For Banquo, could it be that he won't listen anyway because he's a good guy? Could it be that he's not their target for their magic, for their chaos? Could it be that they're saying something about what Macbeth will do? Is it a hint to show how Macbeth might respond differently? Okay. For Macbeth, again, perhaps we could use this to even defend the witches in some way if we were arguing this. We could be saying that the witches almost seem to say to both of them, don't listen to us. They won't speak until spoken to. Because who then actually commands them to speak? Macbeth. So they're not speaking, are they, at first? They actually seem to cover their mouths and say we're not going to. It's actually Macbeth who says, "Speak, if you can, what are you?" And we can call this an order, a command, or the best way to describe it, the best English term would be an imperative, which is just a posh word for an order, and questions them. Okay? So Macbeth actually commands the witches. So he starts it, if we're getting down to sort of playground fight sort of terminology. He is the one who makes them speak to begin with. Now we've got the 3 prophecies. These are really useful to learn as little quotes to embed in your writing and show knowledge of the text. Okay, I'd really recommend learning these. Okay. Now we know he's already Thane of Glamis, that's easy enough, but we know coming on the Thane of Cawdor he will be. Now, we mentioned this in class, didn't we? We can think about the witches here and their purpose. About, are they just trying to cause chaos? Yes is the probable answer. Now we know, in terms of the context, that is what people believed and expected witches to be doing. So Shakespeare would be writing in keeping with his audience's beliefs, right? But does this actually need power? Does this need magic power to know? Well, no, not really. We mentioned this in class, didn't we? Messengers would know. They know something that might have taken a little bit of time to get. You know, they would have had to travel very far, very quickly. But it's not so much a true prophecy, but it seems that way to Macbeth, doesn't it? Because it's, to him, it seems like it comes true straight away. And what theme does this link to? If you remember from our last scene annotations, again, appearance and reality and the difference. So the witches manipulate how men, including Macbeth, perceive the world. Okay, sorry, should move the script there. So, seems a true prophecy has come true straight away to Macbeth, although really it had already happened and the witches just seemed to have advance notice of it. But really the people in the court, when Duncan gave the order for Macbeth to be promoted to the Thane of Cawdor, would have known anyway. So it's not, you know, we can question how much magic this would have actually taken. But crucially, it seemed like a true prophecy straight away, which sparks off his ambition. And it links to the theme of appearance and reality, and how the witches are manipulating men and Macbeth and to perceive and how they perceive the world. All right. So let's look at what Banquo says and how this gives us some insight into the witches. Remember, we're focusing on how Shakespeare presents the witches here, not just the character of Banquo. So make sure you don't, in your essay, go off on a tangent and start talking loads about Banquo when that's not actually what the question is going to ask you about, which is a common error, especially under sort of stressful